The rain pelted the windshield, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world beyond the car. Ethan Carter gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. As the realization hit him like a freight train, he was pregnant. Not just pregnant carrying triplets. And the father was his boss, Lucas Kane, the brooding alpha werewolf who was currently growling at a gas station attendant for standing too close to Ethan's window. It had started 3 months ago, in a haze of late-night work and forbidden glances. Ethan, a 28-year-old graphic designer, had been burning the midnight oil at Kane Enterprises, a sleek tech firm in Boston. Lucas, the company's enigmatic CEO, was a man of sharp suits and sharper instincts, his werewolf heritage a closely guarded secret among the city's elite. Ethan had always admired him from afar, those piercing green eyes, that commanding presence, but he never imagined their lives would collide in a way that would change everything. One fateful night, a project deadline pushed them into close quarters. The office was empty, the city skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lucas had leaned over Ethan's desk, pointing out a design flaw, his voice low and warm. Their hands brushed, and something electric sparked between them. Ethan, an omega with no pack ties, felt his heart race as Lucas's scent pine and leather filled his senses. Before either could think, they were kissing. A desperate, hungry clash that felt like fate sealing shut. The next morning, Ethan woke in Lucas's penthouse, mortified. He'd slipped out before Lucas stirred, hoping to bury the night in silence. But biology had other plans. Werewolf bonds were rare, sacred, and irreversible. Their impulsive moment had triggered a mating bond. And now Ethan was carrying Lucas's children, 3 of them. No less. The news had come from a clinic visit last week, and Ethan was still reeling. He hadn't told Lucas yet. How do you tell your boss, a man who commands boardrooms and packed territories alike, that you're pregnant with his heirs? Stay back. Lucas growled at the attendant, who scurried away, clutching his clipboard. Ethan sighed, rolling down the window. Lucas. He was just offering to pump the gas. Lucas's eyes flashed amber, a sign his wolf was close to the surface. I don't like how he looked at you. Ethan's heart fluttered, a mix of exasperation and something softer. Lucas had been like this for weeks, hyperprotective, almost feral ever since he'd sensed the bond. He didn't know about the pregnancy yet, but his instincts were already in overdrive. Ethan wanted to be annoyed, but the way Lucas's gaze softened when it landed on him made his chest ache. They were on their way to a company retreat in the Berkshires, a weekend meant to build team synergy. Ethan had tried to back out, but Lucas insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, stuck in a car with a man who could smell his every emotion, Ethan felt like he was walking a tightrope. The bond pulsed between them, a living thread that made every touch, every glance, feel like fire. Lucas, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. We need to talk. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he nodded, pulling the car back onto the highway. The rain blurred the world outside, cocooning them in a fragile bubble. Ethan took a deep breath, his hand resting on his still flat stomach. I'm pregnant, he said, the words tumbling out. Triplets. And they're yours. The car swerved slightly before Lucas steadied it. His hands gripped the wheel so hard Ethan thought it might snap. Silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Lucas finally spoke, his voice low and raw. Triplets. Ethan nodded, bracing for anger or denial. Instead, Lucas pulled over, the car idling on the shoulder. He turned to Ethan, his eyes searching, vulnerable in a way Ethan had never seen. You're sure? I got the results last week. I didn't know how to tell you. Ethan's voice cracked. This wasn't supposed to happen. Lucas reached out, his hand hovering before gently cupping Ethan's cheek. But it did. He said softly, "And I'm not going anywhere." The words should have been comforting, but they only deepened Ethan's fear. Lucas was an alpha, bound by duty to his pack and his company. A bond with an omega like Ethan unplanned. Unorthodox could upend everything. And then there was the pack, a shadowy group Ethan had only heard whispers about. Would they accept him? Or would they see him as a threat? As they resumed driving, the retreat loomed closer. A weekend that would force them to confront not just their bond, but the world watching them. Ethan glanced at Lucas, whose profile was etched with determination. He didn't know what scared him more, the life growing inside him or the man beside him, ready to fight for them all. The retreat center was a sprawling lodge nestled in the Berkshire Hills. All cedar beams and roaring fireplaces. Ethan felt out of place among the polished executives and their practiced smiles. Lucas, however, was in his element, commanding attention with every step. Yet his eyes kept finding Ethan, a silent promise that made Ethan's heart race. That night, after a day of team-building exercises that Ethan barely survived, they found themselves alone by the lake. The moon hung low, silver light dancing on the water. Lucas stood close, his warmth cutting through the autumn chill. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I'm not letting you go through this alone." Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. "Your pack, Lucas. They won't want me. An omega with no lineage. No status. My pack will learn to accept you," Lucas said, his voice firm. "You're mine now. They'll respect that." The words sent a shiver down Ethan's spine, equal parts thrill and fear. He didn't know if he was ready to be claimed, to step into a world of werewolf politics and primal loyalties. But as Lucas's hand found his, their fingers intertwining, Ethan felt the bond hum, a reminder that some things were beyond choice. Their moment was shattered by a low growl from the trees. Lucas stiffened, pushing Ethan behind him. A figure emerged, a tall woman with sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly. "Lucas," she said, her voice like ice. "We need to talk. About him." Ethan's stomach dropped. This was Sierra, Lucas's beta and the pack's enforcer. Her gaze raked over Ethan, cold and assessing. "The pack knows," she said, "and they're not happy." Lucas's growl rumbled deep in his chest. "They don't get a say in this." Sierra's lips curled. "They do when it's about the future of our line. An omega. Unbonded. Untested. You're risking everything." Ethan felt like he was shrinking, the weight of her words crushing him. He wasn't just carrying Lucas's children, was carrying the future of a pack that didn't want him. Lucas stepped forward, his presence a wall between Ethan and Sierra. "He's my mate," he said, the word ringing with finality. "And I'll protect him. From anyone." Sierra's eyes narrowed, but she backed off, melting into the shadows. Ethan's heart pounded as Lucas turned to him, his expression softening. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. "Any of you." Ethan wanted to believe him, but as they returned to the lodge, the weight of Sierra's words lingered. The pack was watching, and the bond that had felt like a miracle now felt like a battle waiting to erupt. The next morning, the retreat buzzed with forced cheer, but Ethan felt like he was walking through a minefield. Every glance from a colleague felt loaded, every whisper a potential threat. Lucas stayed close, his presence a shield, but Ethan could sense the tension in him, the way his eyes scanned the room for danger. The bond made Ethan hyper-aware of Lucas's emotions: anger, protectiveness, and something softer, something that made Ethan's heart ache. They were paired for a trust exercise, a ropes course high in the trees. Ethan's stomach churned, not from the height, but from the weight of their situation. As they climbed, Lucas's hand steadying him. Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. "Why didn't you tell me about the pack?" he asked, his voice low. "About what this bond means." Lucas paused, his grip tightening on the rope. "I didn't want to scare you," he admitted. "The bond, it's rare. Sacred. My pack believes it's a sign of strength. But they're traditional. They'll see you as an outsider." Ethan's chest tightened. "And what do you see me as?" Lucas's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "You're my mate. Ethan. My equal. I don't care what they think." The words should have been enough. But Ethan couldn't shake the fear. He was an Omega. Yes. But he'd spent his life carving out his own path, free from pack dynamics. Now, he was tied to a world he didn't understand, carrying children who would inherit its burdens. The ropes course felt like a metaphor for their relationship, precarious, exhilarating, and terrifying. That night, a bonfire lit up the retreat grounds. The team gathered around with drinks and laughter. Ethan sat on the fringes, nursing a soda, when Lucas joined him, his shoulder brushing Ethan's. "You're quiet," Lucas said, his voice soft. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted, staring into the flames. "This is bigger than us. The pack. The triplets. What if I'm not enough?" Lucas's hand found his, warm and steady. "You're more than enough. You're the strongest person I know." Ethan's throat tightened, and for a moment, he let himself lean into Lucas, the bond humming between them. But the peace was short-lived. A group of strangers approached, their eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. Pack members, Ethan realized, his heart sinking. They didn't belong to the retreat, they were here for Lucas. Alpha, one of them, a burly man named Marcus, said, his tone respectful but edged with challenge. "We need to discuss the Omega." Lucas stood, his body a wall between Ethan and the newcomers. "His name is Ethan," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And he's my mate." Marcus's eyes flicked to Ethan, assessing. "The pack demands a meeting. Tomorrow night. You know the rules." Ethan's blood ran cold. A pack meeting meant judgment, a test of his worthiness. Lucas's hand found his, squeezing tightly. "We'll be there," he said, his tone final. The rest of the night passed in a blur, Ethan's mind racing. He lay awake in his cabin, the bond pulling him toward Lucas, who was in the next room. He wanted to run to him, to lose himself in the comfort of his arms. But fear held him back. What if the pack rejected him? What if they saw his pregnancy as a weakness, a flaw in their alpha's judgment? The next day, Lucas was quieter, his focus razor-sharp. He pulled Ethan aside before the meeting, his hands framing Ethan's face. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, "you're mine, and I'm yours. Nothing changes that." Ethan nodded, but his stomach twisted. The meeting was held in a clearing deep in the woods, a circle of pack members under the moonlight. Sierra stood at Marcus's side, her expression unreadable. The air was thick with tension, the scent of pine and earth mingling with the pack's primal energy. Marcus spoke first, his voice carrying authority. "An alpha's mate must be strong, worthy of our line. This Omega has no pack, no history. How can we trust him with our future?" Ethan's heart pounded, but Lucas stepped forward, his voice steady. "Ethan is my choice. He carries my children, our future. Question him, and you question me." The pack murmured, some nodding, others glaring. Sierra stepped forward, her eyes locked on Ethan. "Prove yourself," she said. "Face the trial." Ethan's breath caught. A trial. He wasn't a warrior, wasn't born into this world. But Lucas's hand on his back gave him strength. What kind of trial? Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the fear. Sierra's smile was cold. Survive the hunt. The pack erupted in murmurs, and Ethan's blood ran cold. The hunt was a ritual, a test of endurance and cunning. He wasn't just fighting for himself, now was fighting for his children. For Lucas. For their future. As the pack dispersed to prepare, Lucas pulled Ethan close, his lips brushing his forehead. You're not alone, he whispered. I'll be with you every step. Ethan clung to those words as the night closed in. The forest alive with the promise of danger. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, the moon barely piercing the canopy. Ethan's heart thundered as he moved through the underbrush. Lucas at his side. The hunt was simple in theory. Evade the pack for 3 hours. Prove he could stand as an alpha's mate. But the reality was a pulse-pounding chase, with growls echoing in the distance and the scent of predators closing in. Lucas's hand gripped Ethan's, his eyes scanning the darkness. Stay close, he whispered. They'll try to separate us. Ethan nodded, his senses heightened by the bond. He could feel Lucas's strength, his determination, but also his fun for himself, but for Ethan and their unborn children. The thought of the triplets steadied Ethan's resolve. He wasn't just running for himself, was running for them. The first attack came without warning. A shadow lunged from the trees. A young wolf named Caleb, his eyes glowing with challenge. Lucas moved like lightning, shoving Ethan behind him and meeting Caleb's charge with a snarl. The two clashed, a blur of strength and fury, until Caleb backed off, limping into the dark. They're testing us, Lucas said, his breath ragged. They won't hurt you, not seriously, but they want to see your strength. Ethan's legs trembled, but he forced himself to stand tall. I'm not helpless, he said, his voice firm. Let's keep moving. They pressed on, the forest a maze of danger. Ethan's omega instincts, dormant for years, began to surface. He could sense the pack's movements, their scents on the wind. When Sierra's growl cut through the night, Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lucas's arm, pulling him toward a ravine. This way, he said, trusting his gut. The ravine was narrow, a natural bottleneck. Ethan's plan was risky but clever. Funnel the pack into a space where their numbers wouldn't overwhelm. Lucas's eyes gleamed with pride as they took position, ready to face the next wave. Sierra appeared, flanked by 2 others, her expression a mix of respect and defiance. You're smarter than I thought, she said to Ethan. But this isn't over. The fight was brutal but brief. Lucas's strength held the line, but Ethan's quick thinking using the terrain, dodging strikes kept them alive. When Sierra finally called off the hunt, her gaze lingered on Ethan, a grudging respect in her eyes. You survived, she said. For now. Exhausted, Ethan leaned against Lucas, the bond a warm pulse between them. The pack retreated, but the trial wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a signal that Ethan had earned a place, however tenuous. As they returned to the lodge, Lucas's arm around him, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he could belong in this world. But the peace was short-lived. The next morning, a letter arrived, slipped under Ethan's door. The words were scrawled in sharp, angry strokes, leave, or the pack will make you. Ethan's blood ran cold. He showed Lucas, whose face darkened with fury. This ends now, he said, crumpling the note. Lucas called an emergency pack meeting, his authority absolute. The clearing was tense. The pack gathered in a wary circle. Ethan stood at Lucas's side, his hand resting on his stomach, a silent reminder of what was at stake. Someone threatened my mate, Lucas said, his voice a low growl. Step forward, or I'll find you. No one moved, but Ethan's eyes caught a flicker of guilt on Caleb's face. The young wolf had been reckless during the hunt, eager to prove himself. Before Lucas could act, Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. "I'm not leaving," he said, addressing the pack. "I'm carrying your alpha's children. I'm part of this now, whether you like it or not." The pack was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Lucas's hand found his. A silent vow. Sierra, surprisingly, was the first to nod. "He's earned his place," she said, her voice grudging but firm. "For now." The meeting ended with no further threats. But Ethan knew the danger wasn't gone. The pack was a complex web of loyalty and tradition, and he was still an outsider. But as he and Lucas walked back to the lodge, the bond between them felt stronger, a lifeline in the chaos. That night, they lay together in Lucas's cabin, the fire casting shadows on the walls. Lucas's hand rested on Ethan's stomach, his touch gentle. "I didn't expect this," he murmured, "but I wouldn't change it." Ethan's heart swelled, but fear lingered. "What if they never accept me?" he asked. "Then we make our own pack," Lucas said, his voice fierce. "You, me, and our children." The words wrapped around Ethan like a blanket, warm and sure. For the first time, he let himself believe in a future where they could be a family, not just a bond forged by accident. Back in Boston, life settled into a fragile rhythm. Ethan returned to work, his pregnancy still a secret from most colleagues. Lucas was a constant presence, his protectiveness both comforting and overwhelming. He'd growl at anyone who lingered too long near Ethan's desk, earning curious glances from the team. Ethan couldn't help but smile, even as he worried about the future. The pack's acceptance was tentative, but Sierra's endorsement carried weight. She began training Ethan, teaching him the pack's history and rituals. It was grueling, but Ethan soaked it up, determined to prove himself. He wasn't just Lucas's Matee wanted to be a partner, someone who could stand at his side. As Ethan's pregnancy progressed, the triplets' presence became undeniable. His energy waned, but the bond with Lucas grew stronger. A constant hum of connection. Lucas was there for every doctor's visit, his hand steady in Ethan's, his eyes soft with awe as they heard 3 tiny heartbeats. "They're strong," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Like you." But the threat from Caleb lingered. Ethan caught him watching from a distance, his expression unreadable. One evening, as Ethan left the office, Caleb cornered him in the parking garage. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice low. "You're going to ruin him." Ethan's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "Lucas chose me," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Caleb's eyes flashed, but before he could act, Lucas appeared, his growl echoing off the concrete. "Touch him, and you're done," he said, his voice deadly calm. Caleb backed off, but the encounter left Ethan shaken. He confided in Sierra, who surprised him with her candor. "Caleb's young, ambitious," she said. "He sees you as a threat to his place in the pack. I'll handle him." True to her word, Sierra took Caleb under her wing, redirecting his energy into pack duties. The threat stopped, but Ethan knew the pack's acceptance was a work in progress. He and Lucas spent evenings planning for the triplets, turning Lucas's penthouse into a home. They painted a nursery, argued over names, and laughed until their sides hurt. In those moments, Ethan felt like they could face anything. The turning point came at a pack gathering, a formal event to acknowledge Ethan's place as Lucas's mate. Ethan stood before the pack, his belly slightly rounded, Lucas at his side. He spoke from the heart, his voice steady. "I didn't choose this bond. But I choose this family, he said. I choose Lucas, our children, and all of you. I hope you'll choose me too. The pack was silent. Then Marcus stepped forward, offering a nod. You've proven yourself, he said. Welcome, Ethan. Cheers erupted, and Lucas pulled Ethan into a fierce embrace, his lips brushing Ethan's ear. I love you, he whispered, the words a vow. Months later, the triplets were born, 2 boys and a girl, healthy and loud. Ethan lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, as Lucas held their daughter, his eyes shining with tears. The pack visited, their wariness replaced by warmth. Sierra brought a tiny stuffed wolf, a gift for the newborns. They're our future, she said, her voice soft. Ethan looked at Lucas, at their children, at the pack that had become their family. The bond that had started as an accident had grown into something unbreakable, a testament to love's power to heal and unite. They weren't perfect, but they were together, and that was enough. As the hospital room filled with laughter and hope, Ethan felt the weight of the past lift. He'd found his place, not just as an omega or a mate, but as a father, a partner, and a member of a pack that had learned to embrace him. The future was uncertain, but with Lucas's hand in his, Ethan knew they'd face it together, one heartbeat at a time.